Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to completely unravel the conflicting and, frankly, pretty shocking signals that are currently defining the UK real estate market. I mean, if you've been watching the headlines lately, you've probably noticed a ton of noise. Some people are shouting that prices are skyrocketing, while others are saying literally nobody is buying. It's confusing, right? Well, today, we are going to slice right through all of that confusion. We're going to look at the hard data and uncover the true paradox at the heart of the UK property market right now.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this is the question on absolutely everyone's mind. Are we on the verge of a crash? There's this very real, palpable fear out there of a 2008-style catastrophic collapse in property values. And, with interest rates jumping and living costs soaring, it's pretty easy to assume the bottom is just about to fall out. But as you'll see, assuming a traditional crash is entirely misunderstanding the mechanics of what's actually happening on the ground today.
To get a grip on the true state of the market, you really have to look at this number, 44%. According to recent analysis by Zoopla of their own site data, an incredible 44% of properties marketed for sale over the past 3 years simply didn't sell. Just think about that for a second. Almost half of the properties that people tried to sell just sat there. They eventually came off the market entirely without a buyer. That is a massive, massive volume of failed transactions.
And this massive volume of failed transactions sets up the core contradiction we're facing right now. Today, buying a home is actually getting cheaper relative to renting one in every single region of the UK. And at the exact same time, the supply of available properties on the market is actively climbing. So logic naturally tells us that if buying is cheaper than renting and there's more out there to buy, sales should absolutely be going up, right? Wrong. The actual volume of properties successfully selling remains totally flat. We basically have more people trying to sell without more people actually being able to buy.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how stark this flatlining is for homeowners when you compare it to other asset classes. Over a 3-year period, nominal UK house prices are up a meager 7%. But when you actually adjust that for inflation, house prices have dropped 3%. Compare that to the FTSE 100, which has jumped 33% over the exact same period. Or if you want to get really depressed as a homeowner, look at gold, which is up a staggering 215%. Housing, as an asset class, has completely stalled out.
Section 1. The affordability trap. Why aren't people buying?
So if supply is up and inflation-adjusted prices are actually down, what exactly is holding buyers back? Well, it comes down to a painful irony that is trapping millions of people. Right now, average monthly rents are actually higher than the mortgage payments would be for the exact same property. Let that sink in for a moment. We often assume the crisis is just that houses are too expensive, but people can actually afford the monthly mortgage cost. The absolute tragedy here is they're stuck paying even more than that in rent every single month purely because they cannot access the ability to buy.
And here's the domino effect that makes this trap so incredibly vicious for renters. Step 1, landlords are exiting the market in droves due to new government legislation and higher mortgage rates. Step 2, because those landlords are selling, the supply of available rental properties heavily drops. Step 3, less supply naturally means rents absolutely skyrocket. And finally, step 4, with the cost of living and rents at record highs, systematically saving up the massive upfront cash needed for a deposit and stamp duty becomes mathematically impossible.
Now, we do have to note that this affordability trap doesn't hit the entire country evenly. Different regions are experiencing this to very different degrees. For example, in the first quarter of this year, Scotland actually saw a 2% increase in sales being agreed. But look at Inner London, a staggering 13% decrease in demand. Basically, the higher the cost of living and the higher the required deposit in a specific region, the harder the market freezes.
Which brings us to Section 2, a shift in psychology, the quest for certainty.
You see, this totally frozen, inaccessible market is actively changing human behavior and completely rewiring the psychology of sellers. Contrast the frantic COVID era with the reality of today's market. During the COVID property boom, agents were intentionally engineering these crazy bidding wars. You'd list a property on a Friday, have 10 viewings by Monday, and hold out for the absolute highest possible price. Today, the environment has entirely changed. In a weaker market, sellers prioritize certainty over maximizing their price. They just want quick 30-day sales to reliable, cash-ready buyers whose deposits and lending are already locked in. And they are increasingly willing to accept a 2 to 5% discount just to guarantee the sale doesn't fall through at the last minute.
And let me tell you, those discounts are really adding up. In Q1 of this year, the average home sold for 3.5% below the asking price. In real terms, that equates to almost a £19,000 reduction on average. Sellers are voluntarily leaving serious money on the table because the peace of mind of a guaranteed buyer is far, far more valuable to them right now than waiting months for an offer that might eventually collapse anyway.
Section 3. Stagnation, not a crash, the grand reveal. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it dispels a major myth. Despite all this visible weakness, the discounts and the flat demand we just talked about, we need to completely dispel the myth of a rapid, catastrophic 2008-style price collapse. Here's exactly why a collapse isn't happening. Property markets simply don't crash just because houses are expensive or even because demand is low. A true crash requires mass forced selling, and our current mortgage structure is actively preventing that. First off, most homeowners just don't have to sell. Older owners are sitting on very significant equity. And crucially, a massive portion of the market is locked into 3 to 5 year fixed-rate mortgages. Because of this staggered structure, you simply never get a high concentration of forced sellers entering the market all at exactly the same time.
So the crucial point is we are not crashing. We are experiencing something much, much slower. We're in a state of grinding stagnation. What this means is a slow freezing of transaction volumes. Listings just sit on the market for months, and price reductions slowly tick up, rather than us witnessing a rapid collapse in actual property valuations. It's a quiet, grinding shift into weakness.
Because the reality is, the market freezes before it crashes. Transaction volumes are always the very first thing to collapse. People just decide to stay put, and the properties that do actually hit the market just sit there gathering dust. This slow, freezing environment is exactly the quiet, weaker shift we are witnessing right now across the entire UK.
Section 4. Fixing the foundation. Macro solutions.
So how do we fix a market that's slowly freezing to death? The standard political answer is almost always just a blanket, hey, let's build more homes. But our source material makes a really compelling argument that we need to look much deeper, because fixing the housing market actually requires fixing foundational economic issues. It requires systemic fixes. For example, decreasing the cost of energy by investing in true energy independence, because energy costs drive the price of literally almost everything else in the economy. It requires increasing workforce productivity so it actually grows in tandem with wage growth. And it requires decreasing the actual cost of construction by simplifying planning laws so developers can afford to build at a price point that actually makes sense.
To summarize everything we've covered in this explainer, I want you to remember this powerful quote from the source. You can increase supply, but if people can't afford to buy, that limits the volumes that are selling. It is just the perfect encapsulation of the UK housing paradox. Flooding the market with supply does absolutely nothing to solve a crisis if the population is structurally trapped out of saving the cash required to actually participate in that market. Supply without real affordability equals pure stagnation.
Which leaves us with this final, frankly, provocative thought. As we look ahead to future government policies and promises, we have to ask ourselves, are we actually fixing the foundational economic issues of energy, productivity, and planning? Or are we just throwing temporary bandages on and watching the market slowly, quietly freeze? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this gave you a crystal clear view of what's actually happening out there. Keep learning, keep asking the tough questions, and I'll catch you next time.